sorry for such a late update. I've been working on the game a lot. I've just been busy with school and with the game. I have a lot to talk about, so I'm going to try my best to speak really quickly. I'm not good at talking, and I'm not good at talking quickly, so I'm probably going to mess up a lot of words. But that's just, it is what it is. There we go. So, since the last update, I've implemented the actual enemy spawning system that I plan on sticking with, which is a gradual difficulty ramp similar to Risk of Rain 2's. I've also implemented actual enemy pathfinding. I finished the first monster completely, and I'm using it now as the template for all the coming monsters. And so I've started working on the second monster, and I'm extremely happy with how quickly it's going, iterating on the second one. I've also come up with a possible name for the game, as well as started naming some of the guns and stuff, so I'll have a name reveal towards the second half. And I'm also kind of finished working on the master template for the music. So I want to go into more depth about each of these things, starting with pathfinding. In previous logs, things like enemy pathfinding and spawning were very hacked together with the intent to just kind of show and get a feel for what it would generally look like. Enemies would get stuck behind walls and on corners because they would just see you and then go straight towards you and not account for any impeding objects or structures. Also, they could see through walls. Like, just if you went into their vision cone, they would see you. I've since kind of fixed and changed a lot of that. I've decided to skip A-Star and Navigation 2D in favor of a breadcrumb system. I'm going to leave a link in the description. Check this written tutorial. It really helped me wrap my head around how to carry out the general programming logic of this. Basically, the player is always dropping these cheeky little scent nodes, and the enemies will follow these if they lose line of sight with the player. The pathfinding is all done with just one ray cast, and that cast cycles through first trying to see the player. If it doesn't see the player, it tries to see the most recently dropped breadcrumb, and it goes through that list until it finally sees one. One issue with this initially was creatures would still get stuck on corners. This was because at times the creature would still have a line of sight to a player or a breadcrumb, but that line of sight, while that line of sight wouldn't be impeded, their movement towards that area would still be impeded by a corner. To fix this, I decided to make it so that they couldn't see things right around corners. And to do this, I had to add an extra range of visual occlusion that only affects the raycast that they're casting. This started working correctly, except I encountered a new problem with when a player hugged a wall and they would spawn these breadcrumbs. Those breadcrumbs would spawn inside this occlusion barrier. I solved this with some basic math and Area 2Ds, and now when players hug walls and corners, the crumbs are pushed away from those into an area where they can be visible to the creatures. I'm not going to use this, though, for all the enemies, because I noticed while I was playing, some other roguelites, mainly like Nuclear Throne, not all these enemies will follow you. Some of them kind of just move in random directions, and if you go within their vision code, then they aggro and attack you a bit, but you can easily get away from them, And I found that pretty fun, because I feel like if everything is just converging on you, it's going to be way too oppressive. And I don't want to just force the player into a constantly defensive position, Another issue I had with creatures was when they would get stuck against walls and corners during their wander states. This was a simple fix with 4 Area 2Ds. Whenever one is overlapping with a wall, it makes it so that whatever the next direction calculation is, that part of the direction is overridden in favor of a direction going the opposite way from the wall. Excuse me. So if a creature is colliding with a wall to the right of it, for example, the next vector 2 will have a somewhat random y value still, but the x value will always be -1 or something like that. And then I normalize it, and then, they go away from that region. I also implemented creature spacing so that they don't all clump together completely, or like too close together. And again, that just involved one other Area 2D. I favor Area 2Ds over raycasts because I read somewhere that they're way more performant in casting a bunch of raycasts. Last part of the AI movement I finished was the line of sight awareness and avoidance. I want creatures to have a feel of like sentience and self-preservation. Even if their pathfinding dictates them to sprint straight towards you in a blind rage, I want them to still feel like, oh, this is a thing. So basically, the creatures now can notice you pointing a gun at them and will kind of move out of the way. This is done with a mix of Area 2Ds and using that same line of sight ray cast that's already being cast by the creature when it's trying to chase you. Doing all this AI movement stuff has kind of opened my eyes just to the sheer amount of work that goes into this stuff to make a creature actually feel interesting to interact with, and also how bug prone it is. It makes me just appreciate the stuff all the more. Anyway, let's just move on to creature spawning. I still have a lot to talk about. Jeez. So I've replaced the temporary hacky creature spawning with a system that I plan on using for the actual game, and I'm satisfied with how it works so far. There's something like 13 or 14 named difficulty levels that I plan on displaying in the HUD eventually as some kind of danger detection meter. It will function pretty much exactly like Risk of Rain 2, or at least as I understand it to. Difficulty will always be increasing across the levels, encouraging players to decide, the main choice will be, do I play quickly and just try and get to the end of the loop before it gets too crazy, or do I kind of sit back, take my time, and get more and more power-ups, buffs, and better weapons? Finally started working on a second monster. Now that the first one is more or less totally done and contains pretty much all the functionality that I'd like to have in a base monster for the final product, I have a good template for future monsters, regardless of how they function. The scaffolding is created. Alright, so for the game name reveal, the entire game title is going to be Full Throttle Stress Faction Bullet Shield. I think the primary focus name is just going to be Stress Faction. But I've always been a fan of overly long, bloated, acronym-style names. It's not approachable, it's not like the easiest thing to roll off the tongue, and it's maybe not even the easiest thing to remember, but a lot of this project is just me doing things that I think look cool or sound cool aesthetically, and so, it might not be product-wise like the best choice, but I just kind of like that, I like how it sounds. As for the guns, I've given all of the guns that I'm demoing so far a name. This one is the Bodkin, this one is the Bomb Slug, this one is the Face Cleaver, the Cockroach, the Butterfly, the Thumper, the Metal Storm, the Pendulum, the Longbow, the Saramunet, and there's a couple more planned, but I won't talk about those. I've been building a music template for the game's soundtrack, so I've pretty much completed the template, and I've been messing around with it just to see if it works as I want, and I'm happy with the results. My goal is to make, 30 to 40 plus songs for this project. I want one aspect about this game to be over the top, and something that a normal person would say, yo, scale that back, that's too lofty, And I don't have that ability with programming or with visual art, but I think I do have that ability with music. I think I'm pretty surprised so far with the response to the sounds, because again, I think my sonic intuition and my music background is even kind of showing through the sound design, and the fact that it was received better than I was expecting. I thought it would kind of function as like the bass guitar, where people would be like, oh, this is tight, but not really notice it. And the fact that so many people do notice it made me kind of realize, I think if there's going to be one thing that I just go full throttle freaking hardcore on, it's got to be the music then too. Because again, I think that'll be the thing that stands out. If you look at the game, mechanics-wise, there's not much that differentiates it from other games. And it's not ever going to purport to be that. Again, this is first and foremost always going to be a project that's just like, a big personal project for myself, for my portfolio, a way of exploring, learning programming and linear algebra, learning about how big projects can get gradually more and more unwieldy, and why object-oriented shit is actually important, because I haven't learned that stuff too much in school yet, because, again, we haven't done these massive projects. So I've learned a lot from this. But again, a lot of what I've also learned is how to temper my expectations. And I want a part of this to be like something that's like, bro, what the fuck? That's just like kind of over the top. Why are you doing that, And that's where I think I can do it, is with music. That's one of the things. All right, this is getting very long. I'm just going to call it here, and hopefully I have more things to show for you sooner than later. Maybe even just some tunes or something in the meantime. See you next time. Ciao.